really solemn and distracted. I'm not the best speaker in the world, but my jokes are funny and I can normally hold a crowd pretty well. Not this one. And it was getting very painful. Finally, I just stopped my routine PowerPoint presentation, held up my hands and said, "Whoa, time out. What's going on here?" I wondered whether I needed to start my presentation by doing CPR. You guys look like someone just told you that the world was ending. What I didn't realize was that many of them might have been thinking exactly that. Apparently, an earlier speaker had filled them full of Florida's gloomy financial future. I asked the audience to volunteer what they were thinking, and there was no shortage of replies. It seems that the local economist who spoke just before me showed a lot of crash and burn graphs and charts that demonstrated how hard Florida had been hit by the recent housing and financial crisis. The bottom line was that many of the folks in the room were thinking they were facing the possibility of being laid off. The world was ending. One gentleman near the front volunteered. "Things are bad in Florida, and clearly they are going to get a lot worse. It looks like retirees from the north have stopped retiring to Florida, and our lifeblood of tourism is in steep decline. Everywhere you look, you see empty storefronts, deserted condos, and houses in foreclosure." I said, "Now I get it. So why don't we all slit our wrists and get this over with?" Okay, so I was a bit harsh, but sometimes I find that necessary when you want to bring people back into reality. I told our doomsday spokesman that he was half right. Things were bad here in Florida. But they were not going to get worse. They were going to get better. A lot better. Incredibly better. I had gained their interest. I needed to deliver. I explained to my Boca Raton, Florida audience that it is never a good idea to project the present infinitely into the future. Despite what economists might imply, things do change. I told them that the largest U.S. generation ever to retire was about to do just that, and that this generation, the aging baby boomers, had their retirement held hostage by the housing crisis and resultant diminished equity. I told them that the housing market was coming back, slowly at first, especially in states that had judicial foreclosure, but that once the foreclosures were cleared, a vibrant housing market would reemerge. Baby boomers would then sell their homes, recoup their equity, and descend upon Florida and other warm states like swarming locusts. I told them that they did not have a sufficient infrastructure to handle the millions of baby boomers who were headed their way. They would need to build airports, harbors, roads, bridges, houses, condos, hotels, strip malls, office buildings, shopping centers, and parking structures to handle the volume. Before I knew it, the cheering crowd was carrying me on their shoulders, and someone nominated me for mayor. Okay, so I exaggerated a bit, especially about the mayor part. The rest of it is true. Florida will blossom economically and demographically. And as of the first half of 2016, it certainly appears that my rosy projections are starting to come true. But more on this later. Meanwhile, I continue to believe that the folks in Florida still have no idea just how much their lives are going to change, just how much Florida is going to change. And that's because no one down there has bothered to count people. They haven't counted the massive numbers of baby boomers and played around with these numbers based on historic growth and migration patterns for the state of Florida. When they do decide to start counting, I am positive it will be an eye-opener. Now, if you read my 2008 book, The Age Curve: How to Profit from the Demographic Storm, or you've heard me speak, then you are familiar with my theories regarding the collapse of Japanese motorcycle sales in the United States in the late 1980s and early 1990s. It bears repeating here because it is the perfect example of corporate failure to count people. In 1992, our advertising agency lost one of its biggest and most profitable accounts ever, American Honda Motorcycles. It was no real surprise because Japanese motorcycle brand sales had been plummeting during the previous 6 years. Between 1986 and 1992, the market for Honda, Kawasaki, Yamaha, and Suzuki